watching on live streaming the judgment in the Nkandla case earlier this year, for me was magical and quite marvelous. First of all, the building looked so beautiful, and we created it. It's unlike any court in the world, for just sheer warmth and welcome and feeling and texture. Secondly, the judges were so calm and thoughtful. Everybody in the country was shouting and screaming, and here was pure, rational, thoughtful, principled debate. Judges, counsel on all sides. And thirdly, the judgment that came out was majestic. And people stopped me in the street afterwards, and they just flung their arms around me and embraced me. There was such excitement in the country that the Constitution was holding and meaningful as articulated by the Constitutional Court. That became the centerpiece, in a sense, of the whole book. Why do we have a Constitutional Court? What role does it play? What's the meaning of living in a constitutional democracy? And in a sense, the court is crucial to the whole constitutional order being maintained. It means watching over elections to be free and fair. It means ensuring that all the institutions in government, the presidency, the parliament, fulfill their functions as required under the Constitution. It means protecting the public protector. All of these things were in play in the Nkandla decision, and so much came together, and I felt now's a very good time to put together a whole range of thoughts that I'd expressed over the years, going back to the days of exile when we're dreaming and imagining a new constitution, surrounded by Zambian troops in case paratroopers come from Pretoria to blow us up while we're discussing a future Bill of Rights for South Africa. The ideas of Oliver Tambo, absolutely central. I always ask the question these days, if you did a paternity test on our constitution, whose DNA would come up? And very, very few people know. It was Oliver Tambo, not Nelson Mandela, not F.W. de Klerk, certainly not Albie Sachs, Oliver Tambo. Those crucial ideas developed to have a non-racial society, not power sharing between racial groups, but universal franchise, universal rights for everybody, protecting everybody from being subject to arbitrariness, dispossession, not because they're white or black or majority or minority, but because they're human beings. That was that central idea that runs right through our whole constitutional democracy, and now that's being upheld by the Constitutional Court. Breathing and living and even dancing. If you like, South Africans love to dance, and if a constitution can dance, this is a rhythmic, organic constitution keeping up with some good moves, if you like, in time with the music. It's the music of the nation. It's the music of our beliefs. And at the time when we drafted the Constitution, we were very aware we need a Constitution to set out the rights of everybody, to project our dreams and hopes for perfectibility, but also to guard against corruptibility. We said so at the time, and the book contains many things that I said in 1990, 91, coming back from exile. We need a constitution against ourselves. Nobody is anointed by history to be the automatic rulers of the country. And so we built into the Constitution that tension between perfectibility, our aims, our goals, and corruptibility, our possible failures in the future. Not just them, not just the enemy, not just the other side, but ourselves. And that was in the Constitution, and the delight that I feel and so many other people of my generation feel is that the Constitution is holding. Elections are meaningful. The president steps down after 2 terms maximum. We are a very open society. People speak their mind. South Africans are not cowed. They're not frightened. They can organize. They can mobilize. They can say what they want. And a very energetic, lively, sometimes too lively political scene. All of that is framed within the rights that we gained through the Constitution. It wasn't a lovely, easy, sweetheart deal between the magnificent, wise, saintly Mandela and the sober, pragmatic de Klerk, getting to a corner with businessmen in the background, doing a deal, saying to the lawyers, give us a constitution. It wasn't like that at all. We spent 6 years. We had breakdowns. We had totally different visions of what the government of our country should be based on. Totally different. We had rolling mass action, massacres. Chris Hani was assassinated. We almost had an army coup. We had fighting in the then Bophuthatswana. We had low-grade civil war in KwaZulu-Natal. Thousands of people died during that whole period, people being thrown off trains. But we had to reassemble and carry on with the negotiations, and ultimately, after 6 years, we got this magnificent document, the Constitution of South Africa, which is held up to the world. You'll find a lot of the language in our constitution is found in new constitutions in many continents today. Because we worked so hard, we looked into each other's eyes, we found a document for the whole country with input from all sides. So that was 6 long, hard years, and it was absolutely appropriate that Sharpeville was chosen as the place for the signing. The scene of the massacre now becomes the scene of hope, but a kind of binding hope, a bounded hope, if you like, bounded by our harsh experiences of the past, but also by the optimism of our potential as a nation incorporated in the terms of the Constitution. Comparing then and now, we're a different country. We became a different country already with the elections. Black and white voting as equals for the first time, when people had said it was impossible, it would never happen. We used to hear people saying, one man, one vote once. Democracy is not for Africa. Black people can't rule. They need to have their own tribal arrangements. Democracy is something for whites only. Exactly the opposite was shown. Under white domination in South Africa, we had autocracy, we had book bannings, we had 100 people being hanged every year. We had thousands of people whipped. We had up to 1 million people arrested and prosecuted under the past laws each year. We had forcible dispossession from our homes. My book, which was my thesis, my doctoral thesis at Sussex University on the justice system in South Africa, was banned, not just once, but 3 times. I was banned, the book was banned, and the book was banned because it quoted Mandela, who was banned. Now we have freedom of speech, books are published, films come out. It's such an open society. Extraordinary things are said and done, and you don't go to jail for that. We try to combat racism, and even there, the use of punishment is seen as the last resort. We've had regular elections, the last so free, so fair, nobody objected, millions of people voted. We had a higher percentage vote than they had for the US presidential elections recently for local government in South Africa. The courts are doing their job. They're not being brave. It's not brave to do your work. You do your work. That's work that's given to you by the Constitution. And it's a completely transformed judiciary. And I don't just mean maybe a third are women, over half are black people, but transformed in terms of mentality and vision, absorbing the constitutional vision, a vision of transformation, of change. You see it daily in the work of the courts, particularly the superior courts, setting standards that are admired throughout the world, expansive and open and very pro-human being, and this central theme of unity and diversity, which is a very special South African quality. Unity, the equality of everybody, one country, a united South Africa, but a united South Africa with very different and diverse people, different in languages, political opinions, songs that people sing, the music they dance to, how they celebrate Heritage Day. We're different on just about everything, but it's all contained within the Constitution. So from that point of view, it's another country that we were in. And all the endeavor that went into the years of sacrifice, the people who died, the long years of banishment and prison on Robben Island, in that sense have been vindicated. So my summing up is, yes, this is the country we're fighting for, but no, it's not the society we were fighting for. And that means the country is the country with the people, with a constitutional order, with rights, with institutions, have to get the society we want. The inequality is still massive. There's still an enormous amount of racism in this country. We have unacceptable degrees of corruption at all levels, maybe worst at local government level, but by all accounts, things that are coming out in the courts going all the way up to very high levels in this country, quite unacceptable. We've won our freedom. We haven't won our security in the way we were entitled to walk down the streets, to sleep safely and comfortably at night. So we have huge problems to overcome. But we've got the country, and we've got the mechanisms, and we've got the Constitution to enable us to get the changes we want, maybe a second wave of transformation now. Having won the political battle, a huge political decolonization, the votes for everybody, effectively it means black majority rule in a country where black people are the huge majority, but within a framework of agreed principles and values that apply to everybody, black and white. And that framework gives us the opportunity for the transformations we still need to narrow the gap between the extremely wealthy and the very poor. It's not enough. We have something like 3.5 million homes, brick homes or cement homes with water, electricity, sewage have been given free to people in shacks. That's big. That means maybe a quarter of the population have moved from shacks into, they're not fantastic homes, but dignified homes. We have water reaching 90% of the people, electricity, hugely important, especially for the poor. We have welfare grants for 17 million people. At the time, 1994, it was 4 million, and most of them were white. Now it's 17 million from all sections of the population, a third of the population getting support like that. So a lot has been done to minimize the impact of poverty, but not nearly enough. And what tarnishes everything is if people feel they can't trust the institutions or people who've been chosen or whom they look up to provide the transformations and change they want, then you get cynicism, you get people sometimes taking the law into their own hands, and that's where we need the Constitution to provide that steadying mechanism to ensure we don't need and we shouldn't use the methods we had to use when you didn't have the vote, you didn't have free speech, when you were thrown into prison indefinitely without trial, when you were subject to torture, when you were banished, when you could be assassinated, when the rule of law didn't operate meaningfully for the 90% of the people. Of course we went and used violence and mass demonstrations, but now we have rights and we don't need to burn books and burn buildings and tear things down. We need to open up. We need to open up. But at the same time, having said that, I think there are amazing new energies amongst young people, idealistic, passionate, thinking, not just saying, what can I get for myself? What can I get out of it? How can I become rich and famous? But about ideas. And I think our institutions are strong enough to take that rebelliousness, to benefit from it, and to produce features that can make South Africa a very remarkable country with its own South African energy, but utilizing institutions that are universally recognized as democratic and open. I used to wonder, I'm now driving to court, why did I feel so light? Something special was happening to me each morning. And I thought, is it because we put up the building in the heart of a prison? We are turning negativity into positivity, swords into plowshares. That was part of it. That was part of it. That prison, this prison, the only prison in the world, we say with the dubious pride, where both Gandhi and Mandela were locked up. We have it, we South Africans. And that's where we have now the citadel of our fundamental rights. That was part of it. Was it because it's such a beautiful building, amazing architecture, wonderful artwork, a natural feeling? Yeah, that's positive, but there was something extra. Was it because it connects hillbrow, populous, problematic, dynamic, people from all over Africa there, overcrowded, with the beautiful northern suburbs, not a poor person in sight, with bureaucratic Braamfontein round the other side, the three worlds that normally don't meet on Constitution Hill. Yes, I liked that, but there was something else giving me a lift. And then I would park my car in the underground garage. I would actually get into the lift, and then I'd realized, wherever I go in South Africa to this day, I still feel I'm a white person in a white area, a white person in a black area. The imprint of centuries of slavery, colonialism, segregation, apartheid lies very heavily on our land, in its physical structures. And now I'm coming to the Constitutional Court, where the past and the future are meeting, and I'm feeling this is our little liberated zone which we've created. It's a new enterprise, institution completely. It's a new building of our new democracy. And we have like a family in the court. Everything from the judges, from all sectors of the community, the secretaries, the security, the law clerks. We've created a beautiful exemplar of a non-racial and non-sexist society in this building, in this place. For me, it was magical. I wasn't Albie, the freedom fighter, white by origin, in the struggle, blown up, da-da-da-da-da. I was Albie going to work, a human being. And that gave me an extraordinary sense of uplift, enlightenment, even joy, just physically, even before we started the work. We had many extraordinary moments in the court. Maybe the most intense was the Treatment Action Campaign case, dealing with antiretrovirals for women living with HIV about to give birth. The Department of Health limiting the supply to 2 sites in each of the 9 provinces. If you had money, you could buy it over the counter. And it was safe, it was free, being provided free, and the mothers wanted it, the doctors wanted it. And we are filing into court, and my colleague, Sandile Ngobo, says, Albie, would you like a handkerchief? And I say, no, Sandile, I'm okay. And the background to that was we'd had a case earlier that year about a Mr. Hoffman who wanted a job on South African Airways, and he was refused. He wanted to be a guy pouring coffee. And they said, we'll employ you on the ground, but not as an attendant, because we will lose custom. Our customers, if they know we're giving a job to someone living with HIV, will go to British Air that doesn't allow that. And we're going into court. The court is jam-packed with people wearing T-shirts saying HIV positive. Black, white, men, women, young, old. The nation sitting there, dead silence. And Sandile reads an extract from the judgment saying the right to work is fundamental to human dignity. And instead of South African Airways capitulating to prejudice, they should be taking a stand against it. It was a beautiful few phrases, dead silence in the court. We walk out and the cheering starts, and I started crying. And I cried not just because of the weight of HIV, the pandemic in our country, but to feel I'm a judge. We're upholding fundamental rights. And I told the story when I went to Harvard University, and somebody at Harvard, where Sandile had also gone, emailed him to say, you made your Judge Albie colleague cry. So now he's offering me a handkerchief because we're going to have another case dealing with HIV. I say, no, Sandile, I'm okay. And we go into the court. The Chief Justice Arthur Chaskelson explains in a very sonorous voice that the state is under a duty to take reasonable measures to enable people progressively to realize their right of access to health care. It's not reasonable imposing the limitations. We so order. Dead silence in the court. Dead silence. We go out, the cheering starts again, and I cried again, even though I was ready for it. Just that sense of we are really upholding fundamental rights in a way when we wrote the Constitution we didn't expressly anticipate. Another case that stands out is the case of Mrs. Shilobana from the Baloyi community, and they wanted her to take over from the incumbent Hosi traditional leader who was very, very ill, and the royal family agreed, but the last minute the incumbent said, no, his son must take over. The state says she is the rightful person. The son goes to the High Court. The High Court says, no. You can't elect or choose a traditional leader. You are born a traditional leader. And it will be the son, because it goes through the male lineage. Goes to the Supreme Court of Appeal, the same position, comes to us. The court is packed. 2 busloads of women came down to hear that case. And the one busload from 10 o'clock to 11:15 sitting in the court. Tea break, 11:30 till 1 o'clock, they go out, the other busload sits in the court. At the end of the day, very technical, intricate case, dealing with the role of customary law in our new South Africa under the Bill of Rights, all conducted in English. The Chief Justice, Pius Langa then, working through one of the clerks who could speak Tsonga language, just thanks the women for sitting so patiently and quietly. A difficult case, intricate and not their language. He just thanked them. He didn't say, we're giving judgment for you, just thank you. And they were so pleased, and they nodded. And I felt so proud of our court, that it's now a court for the people. In the end, the judgment did favor Mr. Shilobana and the choice of the people. And we came out in very strong terms about the living nature of customary law. It's not an archaic, fossilized set of rules that are totally patriarchal. Customary law lives, and it's strong and meaningful because it imbibes the life of the people, with women on the bench, women driving cars, having ATMs, having their own property. Why shouldn't, if the community wants it, why shouldn't women be a traditional leader as well? I think these two stand out. I was never a seer, and the bomb that blew me up took away the sight of one eye, so I'm a one-eyed former judge. And I don't prognosticate. I've been wrong on lots of things. But I did have one strong dream. It was a shared dream. In the time of imprisonment, solitary confinement, torture by sleep deprivation, exile, statelessness, blown up by a bomb, all of these things, the clear dream was one day we would get democracy in South Africa. And that was a prognostication that my generation shared. And it came to pass. And lots of people told us, get real, Albie. Come on, we never got real. We never let go of that unreal idea that black and white could live together in conditions of equality and dignity in this country. And I feel that basically having, through the Constitution, not only ended the fighting, bringing about a peace treaty, not only getting a great constitution, but we decolonized South Africa. Because when Britain handed over self-government to the whites in 1910, it was to the whites. The black majority were ruled as a colonized people. So politically, we decolonized, not through separation, independence, through unity in one country. And that was the vision of Oliver Tambo, and it worked. What vision do I have now? It's that we will continue the decolonization process in terms of the culture, the ways of doing things, the habits, the assumptions. And in a sense, the way is wide open for that. The law favors it, the Constitution favors it. It's a constitution for transformation and change. And we have a whole new generation now of people with skills, of vision, a profoundly cultured population that sing, that move, that think, in a sense deeply spiritual. I don't just mean the religious sense. A lot of experience, a lot of wisdom around. I think all the ingredients are there for that second element of transformation that will not try and destroy our institutions, but reinvigorate them with new energies and using the freedoms that we've won through the first wave of decolonization. The first time required a kind of a revolution. Now we need a massive transformation, but it can be much, much more peaceful. And a funny little thing that gives me a lot of hope is that our biggest growth industry in South Africa is stand-up comedians. It says something about our civilization, that we can laugh at ourselves. We rub each other up, but in doing that, we rub off on each other. We're so full of contradictions, and those contradictions could tear us apart, but I think if we manage the contradictions well, we're going to find great energies for a very vigorous and very lively society. Funny, people say I curated. It wasn't like that. The collection almost collected itself all over the world in a way, and we had no money. We were given 10,000 rand in the temporary accommodation that we had to do a little bit to make it look pretty. And we bought one tapestry by Joseph Ndlovu. It was actually a painting which we made into a tapestry. That was all. The rest, I would open art exhibitions. I had some friends who were artists. Some gallery owners were very generous. They donated stuff to us. Eventually, when it came to building, we got a small grant for artwork. I did a tour in the United States to raise funds to support acquiring more art. And one way and another, we got a collection going. I think it's a fantastic collection. And maybe because of its provenance, it was artwork that came here with love, it was given with love, of the most diverse character. Beautiful pieces by famous people, Dumili Feni and William Kentridge and Marlene Dumas, world famous, and people who don't even know they're artists were doing wonderful embroidery and all the rest, carving and so on, to create a very, very particular collection known as the Constitutional Court Art Collection. One of the questions was, should we have a permanent collection that corresponded to the time of transition and change and the early years of the court, or should there be new acquisitions, revolving acquisitions, should it go on tour? And that issue wasn't resolved. I was head of the Artworks Committee. By the time I left, we just posed that dilemma. And now I've cut my ties. There's a new Artworks Committee. They've got fabulous people. People are doing their PhDs now. A lot of research. I'm interrogated almost non-stop on the art collection. At one stage, the court website was getting more hits for the artwork than it was for our judgments. It was rather dismaying for those of us who were judges. So the sense I get now is, and I was able to contribute quite a hefty sum of money when I got a huge prize, international prize, to the Court Artworks collection, and there are now other fundraising activities. I think that will permit, first of all, a proper housing and proper lighting and proper conditions for the artwork. Secondly, new acquisitions. Thirdly, touring. Fourthly, proper access to the artwork through audiovisual interactive means. When you're not even a beggar, you're just waiting hopefully that work will come to you, you can't be a chooser. But the work that came to us was so varied, and the only criteria for me was no denunciatory art. We need art that denounces, that condemns, that exposes, but not in the Constitutional Court. No one should come here and feel, the judges' minds are made up. So we had some wonderful feminist art by Diane Victor, very powerful etchings. But there's so many cases dealing with gender relations. If they're up on the walls, people come here, they might say, I'm a man, I don't stand a chance. So we didn't have art that denounced anybody. Everybody should feel they get a fair, impartial hearing in this court, whoever they are, whatever their gender, their race, their background, their sexuality. So that was the only negative criterion used. Positively, a strong emphasis on the human being. Human dignity is the core of what we go for. Not too much abstract conceptual art at the beginning. Later on, a little bit to show the diversity of artworks, conceptual and abstract art, but a strong emphasis on the human body, and you'll see it as you go through. And then it had to be artwork that proclaimed itself. This is not an art gallery where you come in and you look around. This is a public building, people walk through. So it has to be engaging artwork. Then in terms of the quality, I bought lots of stuff traveling abroad, giving lectures in Sri Lanka and Latin America and so on. Wherever I went, I would come back with batiks and embroidery and sometimes craft. And they found spaces in the walls in different places, and maybe the particularly significant spaces, artwork of the highest quality, and then other more popular art in other reaches. And it gives also a universal character and a sense of vitality and variety. Normally you have an artworks procurement committee, usually dominated by one or two people, and it's their selection, or they can't agree and you end up with banal work, lowest common denominator. Here, because of the serendipitous nature, we got very, very varied artwork. Now what's interesting, by the way, can you hear the cries of the children outside? That's a horror for filmmakers. It delights me as a judge. It delights me. This is not an enclosed space. We wanted it to be open to the people. We can literally hear the voices of the people outside. So I hope those voices are not elided. There's a school down there. The people stay up there. They walk past. The kids love sitting in and playing on the Dumili Feni sculpture at the top. And just hearing their voices now, as I say, is a delight for me as a judge. Parliament was Parliament, with new incumbents, with democracy. The building remained the building. Union buildings, the union buildings, with new incumbents, the same buildings. But we didn't have a constitutional court. We had to invent ourselves, which was fantastic, because normally, if you go into an old court building, if there are any images at all, there'll be pictures of dead, white, male judges. Now one day I'm going to be a dead, white, male judge, so there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's all you see, it's actually a sad story. It's saying only whites mattered, only men mattered. It's contradicting. Your history is contradicting the things we were fighting for and achieved. So we could invent ourselves. We could decide where we should be. We should decide what the building should be like. And we were shown 10, 15 different sites, mid-Rand. Beautiful sites, but it would have been so corporate, cheek by jowl with big international companies. The workers would feel they didn't stand a chance. We were shown inner city, the old post office, a wonderful building, but jam-packed. A court needs to breathe, it needs space to manifest its independence. And then we were shown the old fort prison. It was so decrepit. There were weeds growing everywhere. People were stealing the metal parts. It was really run down. And I remember Johan Krechler and I for sure said, yes, 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 this is where we must put our court. It had been decommissioned, it wasn't being used as a prison. Its site was so special, but its history was so meaningful. Everybody locked up everybody here. So that site of oppression and pain and domination, the Brits locking up the Boers locking up the Brits, the Boers afterwards, the Boers locking up the blacks. We've got to stop locking each other up. Gandhi, Mandela locked up here. So much of our history here, and that painful negative history now becomes a source of transformation and change. And it's such a significant site because it links Hillbrow, such an African part of Johannesburg, people from all over the continent, with the beautiful northern suburbs, not a poor person inside, bureaucratic Braamfontein. So the site was right, the history was right, but what kind of building should we have? And I was friendly with Jack Barnett. He was one of the freedom struggle architects who only got work through competitions. The developers hated him, the government hated him. He finished one project that he won through a competition sitting in jail. He was locked up after Sharpeville in 1960. And he said, Albie, you must have a competition. You will uncover fresh talent that way. We had a competition, and it was international. About 500 people wrote in, prepared the brief very carefully, making it clear we didn't want a big, imposing building representing the power of the state. We wanted a warm, friendly building. Our job was to restrain the power of the state, not to magnify the power of the state. Not an ornate building, not an ostentatious building. A building that reflected all the cultural inputs without being a fruit salad of different cultures. These were the themes we put in to the brief that we wanted, the brief that went out. 186, I think, entries came. We had an international jury, South Africans, an Indian architect, a Sri Lankan architect, the editor of the British Architectural Review. I was on representing the court. We had somebody representing the architects and Soptaku, mainly black building technicians. We had the mayor of Johannesburg, Isaac Mokgasi, who'd been locked up in number 4 prison. And he said when he was locked up, if he had told the warders that one day he would be the mayor of Johannesburg awarding the competition brief, they would have killed him. And we also had Tenji Mtensel, who was on the jury. She'd been locked up in the women's jail. She said, why am I on the jury? You saw there were only men. She was absolutely right. She became the most influential member of the jury. She said, I know why I'm on the jury. I'm my mother. Her mother took in washing from white families to send Tenji to school and university. Tenji said, my mother is frightened of modern buildings. She feels she must go round the back. She walks in timid. She asks somebody where she must go. Is the building frowning at her? Is the building smiling at her? My mother wants a building that's smiling at her. That's the one I want. And she pointed to what turned out to be this building. And I loved it, and Isaac Mokgasi loved it. And the editor of the British Architectural Review said it's the best jury he's ever been on, because normally the professionals fight amongst themselves. The lay people line up behind the professionals, usually backing the most mediocre project. This case, the lay people wanted the most adventurous project, and they persuaded us to go along. So Tenji's wish was fulfilled, and we didn't know it was number 67 or 93. We had to open the envelope. We discovered it was 3 young Durban architects and a town planner from Johannesburg. They got the feel right. And they were so responsive to critiques and criticism and making changes and listening to the judges afterwards that we got this, I think, quite wonderful building.